Brian Sims, you are very welcome to the number. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good. I'm very pleased to join you.
So the last time I saw you, we were lounging by a beautiful pool in the hills of Hollywood in the sunshine, and now it looks like you're in a cabin in the woods.
I know, so fancy. I am. I'm in a cabin in the woods just outside of Manhattan on a lake. My partner and I, about a week and a half after we saw you, we jumped in a car and drove cross country back to the East Coast, and we bought a lake house out here, and just in time for him to fly to Hong Kong. He left a couple of days ago, and so I'm here, kind of pulling our house together.
So there's a lot of change for you because hold on, you're headed to Hong Kong in a couple of weeks yourself, right?
I am. In about 6 or 7 weeks. I'm gonna head out there and join him and do some work for Out Leadership, the company I work with, and spend a little time with him.
How exciting. Okay, I want to hear everything, right? Because we only had a brief chat. I was kind of fascinated by your story. You've had a very interesting trajectory, I think it's fair to say, in terms of, your football career, your growing up. Let's start with your family. So this is all about crunching the numbers, obviously, the numbers of your life, the numbers that have been the most significant in your life and your journey to date. So when it comes to your family, what's a meaningful number for you?
This is an easy one for me, and the number is 17. It's a higher number for my folks, that's for sure. That's the number of places that I have lived as an Army brat. My mom and dad are both retired lieutenant colonels in the Army. They met during the Vietnam War, and stayed active duty for most of their adult lives. And we lived everywhere, from Alaska to Kansas, to from California to Virginia, and moved about every 2 to 4 years or so as a kid. And then, of course, I moved for school and for school again, and have moved a couple of times for work. But yeah, 17 was that magic number. When I was growing up, it became really clear I was going to live in a lot of places. And at some point or another, I realized it had been 17 different places.
Were they all within the United States?
They all were in the United States. The Army does this really interesting thing where, and I don't know if they still do it, and I don't know if it was just officers like my folks, but at some point you kind of have to do an overseas assignment. Now, they had done one early on in their careers. They were stationed in Germany, in Würzburg, which is where my older brother was born. But as I understand it, when we were living in Kansas, at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, the largest federal prison in America, is also an Army base. When we were living in
Yikes.
Fort Leavenworth, my parents got an overseas assignment, and that included Alaska. And so in
Is Alaska overseas?
not if you ask me, but if you ask the Army in the, I guess in the 80s at the time, they considered it, if you would accept a posting in Alaska, it would satisfy the need for an overseas assignment. And so my parents, probably around 1984, 85, when I was a little kid, moved to Eagle River, Alaska, just outside of Fort Richardson, the Army base there.
So that's kind of interesting because I've always felt that I'm a little bit of a nomad in terms of when I reference my upbringing. So I lived in five different family homes, which in terms of, because we moved, but they were always within Dublin. And in comparison to my other friends, that was a lot because most of my friends grew up in the exact same house that they were born into. So I kind of always thought, oh, we're quite nomadic, but 17 is quite a lot. What do you learn or what does that teach you about life, do you think?
There are two big things I'd like to think it's taught me. One is my parents did this wonderful thing where every time we moved, for the most part, we got rid of a third of our stuff. They would sit us down and say, go through it. If you haven't opened it, if you haven't played with it, if you haven't read it or looked at it in the last 2 years, you don't need to take it to the next place either. And so that ability to sort of cull the ranks, sort of look at your things critically in terms of not just utility, but sort of what they bring to your life is something that I try to do a lot of. Now, I'm not going to turn this camera around because I have
I was looking at your
bunches of
shelves.
crap piled up. Yeah, but yeah, I've gotten very, very good at being able to look critically at the things around me and sort of realize what needs to come with me and what doesn't. And I wish I could use that skill in far more places in my life.
And what's the
Yeah,
most important thing that needs to come with you?
what's the most important thing that needs to come with me these days? It's my partner Alex.
Oh,
Everything that's in this house has been, for the most part, in storage for almost a year, and it didn't matter to me a tenth as much as being around him did this last year. And that's hokey as hell, but it is so true. I've
I love
always
that.
believed, literally, that sort of home is where you hang your hat, and I've been hanging my hat next to his for for about 6 months now.
Well, that's so interesting because my life, I guess, kind of is similar to yours in some respects in the sense that I've lived in a lot of places subsequently as an adult. And that's the thing that it taught me. It's like I've never always had all my belongings, but I've always realized as long as I've a roof over my head, some nice food in the fridge or and some clothes. I don't need a lot of clothes, even though I love clothes. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, it really is sort of wonderfully equalizing to travel a bunch and not be able to have all of the things around you that you own or that you like or that bring you comfort. And you get good at triaging what your actual comfort level needs to be and what it is. And for me, I guess the other thing that's made me really good at is that I can pack a 4 bedroom home into the back of a hatchback car in about a half an hour. I'm an expert mover. I hope my friends are gonna back me on this. If any of them are watching, I am an expert mover. Truly, I can pack it down with the best of them and help. I'm good at helping other people move, and I'm good at doing it myself.
I don't care what anyone says, but that is a key life skill, in my opinion. You're a twin, Brian, right? So you grew up in a household. There was four of you. What's
Mhm.
it like having both your parents being colonels in the army? Like, was it a regimented household?
Yes and no. Much more on the no side than the yes side. There's 3 boys and a girl in our house, and anybody that's got kids knows you just can't regiment it that much. On the other flip side of it, though, my parents are, they are natural leaders. Is one of the ways I would describe them. And maybe it's not even so natural. They've had a lot of training in their lives, but they are good about getting an outcome without having to sort of browbeat or without having to, that awful sort of regimented thing that most people think of when they think my parents are military. Wasn't a part of my childhood at all. They were good about getting out of us what they needed and knew the different ways of doing that. And yeah, I woke up to Revelry in the morning, the bugle song. My dad would whistle that to wake us up in the morning.
What's that song? What's the song?
I could probably do it on a bugle better. I wish I had a harmonica around here.
I love that.
And we all learned how to do our own laundry and wash our own dishes and clean up after ourselves and clean up after whoever was around us. And I think those are really valuable life lessons.
That's pretty impressive. And are you close to your brother to this day?
I am. My twin brother lives down in Florida, and that's the big problem. He and I are completely different people. We've had very different tracks in life from the get go. He is straight. He's married with a phenomenal wife and children in Florida, and I don't see them nearly enough. And maybe now that I've got this place, they'll get a chance to see me in one spot.
I love it. Okay, when it comes to your career now, this is where for me I've so many questions.
Yeah,
So we'll start with the number, I guess, that changed everything for you in your career.
yeah. It's two, and
I
it'll
love that.
always
So,
be two.
so
Um,
specific. I love it.
Yeah, Darren, when I was in my early 30s, I'm a civil rights attorney by trade, and I was living in Philadelphia and working in Philadelphia as a gay man in a city that had phenomenal LGBTQ civil rights, or at least was kind of working towards having phenomenal LGBTQ civil rights in a state that wasn't at all. And I got myself affiliated with Equality Pennsylvania, the state's LGBTQ advocacy organization, and was doing everything I could to try to pass any non-discrimination laws in the state. And this talking point really stuck with me for a number of years, and that it is that no state that ever really passed any comprehensive relationship recognition laws while I was trying to do this did it without first having an out legislator, and we did not and had not. In fact, I didn't know this, but we were the second largest state in the country that had never elected anybody openly LGBT. And so I tried for a bunch of years to do it. There were some fantastic candidates in Pennsylvania that I worked to try to get elected, and a couple of them came very maddeningly close and didn't. And I was sitting in my office one day and I was listening to a news report of my own local elected official who said something that I considered to be very anti woman, very anti trans. And she was a liberal woman. And I went and met with her and I told her I was going to run against her. And she told me to go fuck myself. And it made me like her more.
Of course it did.
right? I mean, she was kind of notoriously mean, and a mean liberal is a hard thing, right?
She's
And
ballsy.
I,
She's got balls. I like it.
she was just maybe balls isn't what she needed. She had guts. She had everything but balls. Balls are weak in politics. She was just tough as nails, and you know I had known her for years, and I had worked with her. I at least had tried to, and I went and told her, and I rehearsed it. I told her I was going to run the largest, cleanest, healthiest race in the history of my district, and I was going to beat her because of it. She told me to go fuck myself again, and I left. I spent the next 10 months doing exactly what I told her I was going to do. And in the end, in 2011, I was elected by 2 votes, and it changed the trajectory of my entire life.
And had you always desired to get into politics, or when did that start?
11 months before that. That's a little too trite. Maybe a year before that. No
Mm.
is the quick answer. In part because it was not something that really avails itself of army brats. One of the prevailing rules, if you will, of politics is that people run in places where they've lived. And as an army brat, I was from a little bit of everywhere, and decidedly not a Philadelphian or not from Philadelphia. Pennsylvania is notoriously one of those states where very few people ever leave it. And so the vast majority of elected officials are second and third generation. Philly hadn't elected somebody that wasn't born there or educated there in 40 years when I was finally elected. And so it just didn't seem like something that could be on my radar. So it never was. Civil
Um,
rights always was, but not politics.
what do you think it was about you that got it over the line? What do you think was your ticket to success in that race?
It was a couple of things. One is that I had put the work in. I had spent the almost 10 years prior doing every single thing I could do as an attorney, as an LGBTQ advocate in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia to fight for the things that I promised people I was going to fight for in the legislature. I didn't have to make up an agenda. I had an agenda, and I had a history of working towards accomplishing that agenda. The other thing is that because I was from everywhere, I asked people everywhere for support, and largely received it. I got donations from all 50 states in the United States that year. It was necessary. I outraised a 28-year incumbent probably 5-1, and still only won by 253 votes.
How so? I obviously come from another country, and the system here is so different. But how important is that correlation between what you fundraise, that amount, and your success?
Yeah, yeah, it is in a lot of places the two leading indicators of who will win on a ballot are the person that is first on the ballot or the person that raised the most money. Neither of those things should determine whether or not a person is elected. Now, I can make people feel better about the money in politics, but we should all feel bad about it overall. And that is because there's far too much money in politics from nefarious places and places that should not be allowed to engage in politicking, but they do. And it's almost impossible for sort of regular people to keep up with the amount of money that pumps into our politics from now businesses and from other places that, again, I don't think should be involved in politics. But at least on a local level, like races like mine at a statewide level, all the way up to about Congress, the money that people donate is going to get the word out.
Hmm.
Candidacies are a really awful experience sometimes. They can be really gratuitous. You can feel really overexposed. But that money, especially like I said in local races, is going to make sure that people know who you as a candidate are. That means it's going to mailings. It's going to those little things that hang on your doors or get shoved under your mat. It's going to sometimes ads and commercials, which are very, very expensive. Again, because you're competing against industries.
Hmm.
But what it's not generally doing is going to make people rich. I think that's one of the big fears that people have at donating to politics is that you're donating to sort of fat cats. Now, at the big media level, that is maybe a little truer, but it wasn't true in any race I was ever in. Every dollar I saw raised really, for me, was put back into a campaign in a way that I thought would have a real return, not to make anybody rich.
And I think a nice segue of that is when I ask you what's the question or what's the number that you'd like to forget. I think there's a
Yeah,
tie in there.
there is. It's a big number. When I was running for a couple years ago, I ran for lieutenant governor, and it was a race that I had put a lot of time, years and years of time and energy into it. and was a front runner in that race. Had raised again from all 50 states in the country within about 100 days of launching that race, and I would go on to raise a real unprecedented amount of money, more than anybody had ever raised for a lieutenant governor's. But the person that was running for the Democratic ticket of governor did not want me as a running mate, and chose somebody, even though the Constitution of our state says that the primary election is the time where the voters of the state, decide what the ticket is. Months before the primary, the Democratic, what would go on to become the Democratic nominee, chose a candidate to run alongside him, who just unfortunately did not put the same amount of work into that election. And so, as the months drew on towards the end, they ended up putting a truly unprecedented amount of money onto that candidate, millions of dollars on that candidate, and that was something I was not able to keep up with. So I lost, and that's politics.
My God! So that was $3 million. That's the number there.
$3 million.
Wow,
that's the number I was told.
That's harsh.
Huh?
That is harsh. That is harsh. It's like that is harsh. Now, listen. On a lighter note, I believe you have a very interesting political button collection. Tell me about this collection. I used to collect beer mats as a child. I used to collect beer mats from all over the world. Tell me about your button collection.
Yeah, I've had it for the longest of time. So Geraldine Ferraro was the first woman on a major party's ticket when she ran for the vice presidency years and years and years ago. And I inherited some Geraldine Ferraro political memorabilia when I was a teenager, and it started this sort of fascination, largely with civil rights and women's rights in memorabilia. And as I got into politics, it certainly sort of doubled down on the political side. And maybe a year or two into my time in office, I did an interview with this board behind me that had a bunch of buttons on it. And people figured out that I collected political buttons. And what followed for the next 10 years, hundreds, and what became thousands of buttons. When I left office last November, there were about 1,500 buttons on display in my office, but another 1,000 that weren't. And a really cool thing happened to them. The archives of Pennsylvania, the archivists knew that this was a really serious collection of mine. It's probably the largest collection of its kind in the state. And they came as I was closing up my term, the last month or so of my term, and they archived my entire collection and took it off to the archives. So now everybody can go see it, and it's all stored in ways that will maintain this collection for years after I'm gone.
I love that. Oh my God, that's so interesting. You also, you've a Benjamin Franklin quote on your arm, right? Can I see that and hear about that?
Yes.
So, oh my God, that's long.
It is.
I'm surprised you didn't have to get that in your leg.
Hurt like hell.
I have one tattoo I'm going to show you. It's the smallest tattoo.
So tough.
No, I got that when I was 15, and what should have taken 5 minutes took about 55 minutes because I am not good with needles. Anyway, but yeah, I was like, ow!
I got at 15 also.
Which one?
I have a little American football on my back.
Ah, okay. We're going to get to that. Tell me about the quote. What does it say?
The quote is, it's a Benjamin Franklin quote, as you pointed out. And the quote is, "Be civil to all, sociable to many, familiar with few, friend to one, enemy to none." And it was Benjamin Franklin's sort of philosophy on governing. And it has followed me my whole life. When I was a little kid in Alaska, I had a lawn mowing service, and it was the quote that I put on the back of my business card as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid. I still have one of them around here laminated because, those were the days when your mom laminated everything. And I pulled it from an Encyclopedia Britannica, and I used it in book reports in high school. I used it in projects in college. I used it when I was in law school, and I used it as a lawyer. And about an hour after I was sworn in, it was pointed out to me that I represented Benjamin Franklin's first district in the House of Representatives, and that this quote was from when he had been sworn in.
Oh my God, I'm getting chills. It kind of feels like this. That is kind of crazy. It feels like that was almost like it was your destiny.
It was kismet, meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that. Well, mine actually means freedom. So mine's it's Mandarin, I believe. It means freedom and joy. Two things that two of the main tenets of my life.
Things I wish on everyone.
Yeah. And I chose that one Saturday morning at 11 a.m. And my friend who we went into the tattoo studio with, he got like Freddie Flintstone. So I looked out.
Have you had it confirmed? Are you sure that's what it says?
I actually have, because I had for a long time I'd forgotten what it actually means. Like I knew it roughly meant happiness, freedom, but I didn't know exactly. And a couple of years ago, I was in Bali and I was in a gym and I was wearing a sleeveless tank. And a guy came up to me and he said, hey, happy guy, or something like that. I'm like, hello, what? And he goes, oh, your tattoo. I goes, oh, he goes, yes, it means joy. And I went, oh, really? I love
Uh-uh.
that. And I said, I thought it meant kind of freedom. And he went, well, it means joy and freedom. I'm like, I'm here for it. I love it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
isn't
so
it?
affirming.
Yes. It's like literally, freedom in life, living life with joy. I mean, you need very little else, to be
True
honest.
story.
Not to sound like, twee, but it's true actually. If you can embrace both of those, you've come a long way.
Well,
Um
and if Bali doesn't remind you of that, no place will.
exactly, right? Now listen, you mentioned him earlier on, the lovely Alex. When it comes to love, what's your number?
My number for love is 3,000, and it's a number that actually has been in my life a lot, but it is especially true with Alex. He and I, we met a little over 2 years ago. We met in Provincetown, Massachusetts, my one of my favorite places in the whole world. And I was late getting up there in the day. I was supposed to be up much earlier in the day, and so when I arrived after about 8 hours of driving, I had to go straight to the boat slip. I had to go to high tea to
Oh,
meet
you had to
Alex.
go. You
I
had
had
to
to
go.
go.
Okay,
Well, no, I
okay.
really did. My one of my best friends in the world lives up there, Julian Sear. He's the senator for the whole Cape, and he was already there at tea, and so I had to meet him to get into his place. And I found him briefly in the crowd, and he left to go get me a drink. And in the minutes while I was standing there alone, the whole crowd at tea just split down the middle, and there was this really handsome guy at the far end of this like gauntlet. And I didn't know if he was checking me out. I was definitely checking him out, and I kind of did that thing where I looked around and shifted my body weight a little bit and eyed him up, and then the crowd closed up, and I thought that was the end of it. And about an hour and a half later, I was going to leave, and he came up and he stopped me and my friends and said hello. And my friends like golf clapped him for saying hello. And we brought him with us to dinner. And he and I have been dating ever since. But about a month after that all happened, he moved to Berkeley, California from Boston to start graduate school. 3,000 miles away from Philadelphia. And for the first year and a half of our relationship, we were 3,000 miles apart.
Oh my God. And how did you navigate that? And I don't mean that geographically, obviously, but I
Yeah.
mean, did you, because that's very early days, but you knew, right? What was it
I
then?
did know. One is that part of it I was running for that lieutenant governor's race we were talking about earlier that I lost. I was doing that, and I was on the road full time all the time, about 1,000 miles a week on the road. And he would fly out for a week at a time, and about once a month or so, and be with me on the campaign trail, which was a wild experience, I'm sure, for him. And I had to be out in California a couple of times during the election for fundraising, and so he would come join me for that. And he's a little younger than I am, and he was a lot more into using FaceTime than I was at first. But it was just one of those things where we made it work. I 6 months into dating him, I could tell that we had something really special. A year into dating him, I knew I was completely in love with him. And it took another 6 months or so before we even could live together, and that was this last summer.
Oh my God, what a love story. And you know what? It gives so much hope, let me tell you, because as obviously as anyone who has been single recently or dated recently, it can be tough. I was actually talking to a friend of mine last night who was telling me that her girlfriend had been seeing this guy. They were getting on great. 3 weeks had passed. They were making plans. They were both soccer fans. And there was a soccer match that was going to be on early in the morning because it was in the UK. They'd arranged that they were going to go watch the match, but she was going to prepare brunch, have mimosas, do the whole thing. The next day, the time that he was meant to arrive came and went. There was no sign of him. Half an hour passed, no sign of him. So she starts messaging him, no sign of him. 3 p.m. that day, she's like, okay. She sends him a message going, if you're not into this, that's fine, but just let me know because I kind of think that, I'm worried something might have happened. She never heard from the guy again. He totally ghosted her. What is that about? I absolutely cannot comprehend that.
That's technology allowing bad people to be even worse.
Yeah. Oh God, makes me feel ill just thinking about it. You said at the beginning of that answer, 3,000 is a number that comes up for you. Has come up for you a lot. How else has it come up?
So my mom is from Central California as well, and so my family has often sort of hugged the coasts of the United States, and so it's been a regular thing where we've been 3,000 miles apart. I every summer of college I lived in California while my parents were in the Philadelphia suburbs, and I it's been one of those things where we're rarely 1,000 miles apart. We're often 3,000 miles apart.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Um, in terms of ages, I mean, some people get hung up in ages, some people don't. But for you, what's been the kind of most significant age for you and why?
Yeah, I am not somebody that gets hung up on age. I'm 44 years old. I'll be 45 next month, and I've never felt better. And hopefully I last another wonderful 45 years. But my 33rd birthday happened right about the time that I was elected to office, and just a really transformative time in my life. I started to grow a beard. So first and foremost,
Priorities.
my beard happened. It was when I was transitioning from being an attorney to being an advocate and being an activist, and taking the work that I had done to urge lawmakers to pass laws to become somebody that was trying to do it myself. And it was sort of a time period when I sort of stepped off the income scale. As an attorney, I wasn't making good money, but I made consistent money. And as a legislator, you just don't, and that's a part of the job. And I knew that I was going to spend however long, sort of making an income that would require me to have roommates and that kind of a thing. And it was just a very, very, very transformative year in my life.
You know, a lot of people struggle with the courage to do something like that. Especially, you've spent years in law school. It's grist for the mill, and then you step off knowing that there's a bit of a cliff when it comes to income, lifestyle, and so on. Where do you get that courage from, or what do you attribute that to?
Oh, I don't think it was courage. First and foremost, I think it was much more out of necessity. I think the best high-minded version of my story is that it is courageous, but the truth is, it was necessity. I spent a long time trying to find and fund and train other people to run for office because I thought other people would be more viable than I was, for lots of different reasons. And when it finally happened, it wasn't the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. It was the sort of mechanics of equality and what needed to happen in order to put in motion a whole bunch of things that were required to accomplish a goal that I have, and that was equality. And I teach people often about what privilege means in the United States, because everybody has some degree of privilege, and a lot of us have much more privilege than we're even comfortable with. And the only thing I know to do with that privilege is to use it to break down the systems that perpetuate it. And so, I feel like, everybody in our legislature that was doing things that I opposed looked just like me. And so
Mhm.
it required me to get up and say, hey, this is racist, and this is sexist, and this is homophobic and transphobic. And that was what I built my career doing.
Even though you might not look at it this way or through this lens, I still think that is incredibly courageous. And you're probably too humble to say it, when I say courageous, I say it in the truest sense of the meaning. Courageous, the root of the word goes back to Latin, right? And it's like, in its truest sense, it means following your heart. And that's what you're doing. So,
Definitely followed my heart.
yeah, more power to you. You're following your heart. You got the husband, you got the job. I mean, listen, you got the cabin in the woods. It's all going on. I'm loving it. When it comes to kind of pivot points in your life, what's the number that changed everything for you?
There's a silly number, and that's number one. Um,
Okay.
I only have one kidney. And it's because a couple years ago I donated my other kidney to a neighbor that was dying. And I did not know until that moment that an adult could live very comfortably and easily with one kidney. It has virtually no impact on my life. But as someone who's about to turn 45 years old, I can very comfortably say that if you're considering donating an organ, or donating a kidney at least, to somebody else, that there are far too many people in this country that need one, and you only need one. And so I live every day with one kidney.
Actually, I've been hit with emotion there. I don't know why. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it was a very not easy physically, but a very
Mm.
easy thing to do emotionally and intellectually. When the opportunity availed itself, I remember telling a couple people that were close to my life that were very nervous for me.
Hmm.
Um, but when I called my mom and dad and said, "Hey, there's this guy. He lives nearby, and he's gonna die without a kidney, and I'm a perfect match, a truly perfect match, and I'm gonna do it." My parents were so excited, and they were very. They said, "Great. When can we be there? What can we do?" And
Wow.
I knew in that moment why it was such an easy decision for me to make, and it was because of the my parents had maybe prepped me for a decision like that my whole life.
That's kind of incredible. And are you still in touch with the person? The
Oh yeah,
person? Yeah.
yeah. When I when it was all going on, his name is Alan. When it was all going on, Alan was so sick that he wasn't himself. Glimpses of himself for sure. The best parts of himself were still there, but he was so sick that he wasn't there. He has a husband. His husband John makes up for in personality what Alan at the time was lacking in personality, and they have stayed friendly with my parents. But it wasn't long after maybe a year after the surgery. I was walking through Philadelphia. I was standing outside of one of my favorite gay bars, kind of a restaurant, and I heard somebody clear his throat and say my name. And I turned around and there was Alan sitting with John outside this cafe having lunch for probably the first time that they'd been able to do something like that in years and years and years because he was going to die.
And how does
And
that make you? How does that make you feel in that moment?
oh, we cried our eyes out. I
Mm.
sat down and buried myself in some Mai Tais and we told fun stories and talked about what being out and about was like. And it took a long time for him to get that sick, and it took a long time for him to get healthy, but that was the turning point, and so it's worth reflecting on.
That's pretty magical. You did mention another number though when you were first coming out. So obviously you're a college football captain. Is that right?
I was a college football captain, and it sounds so hokey to say that 72 is a number that had a real big impact on me, and it was my college football number. I was a big kid. I'm physically almost the same size I was when I was about 14 years old. I was a huge 14-year-old. And
Jesus
all I knew,
Christ.
right? Yeah, crap. I wouldn't have messed with me, but I was so gay and so new everywhere I went that, I was probably an easy target. And so I never thought I was going to be a college athlete. My twin brother is a multi-sport athlete. My older brother was a phenomenal athlete in high school. And so it just wasn't on the radar for me. I was a nerd, and I liked that space. It was something I was very comfortable in, and it allowed me to sort of avoid people and kind of do my own thing. And then I moved to a place where at this size, at 14 years old, they make you a football player whether you wanted to be one or not. And it just kept getting better and better and better for me. I played on winning teams, and all of that was really fantastic. But my college teammates and my high school teammates, many of whom are still my best friends today, are some of the biggest transformation stories of my life. Coming out to all of them, coming out to a college football team. I
How did they react to that? Because obviously, you were
They were
breaking
great.
ground.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, this is 24 years ago. This is 22 years ago. This is 2000. My teammates in college were very nervous that over the years they might have said or done things that made me secretly not like them or hate them even, and that wasn't the case. My buddies, my teammates were very good people, and I wasn't that type of person in the closet that was that would have accepted homophobia or transphobia around me. I didn't accept racism or sexism, and so largely that was the language they kind of used back to me. But there were a lot of tears, usually theirs. A lot of my teammates really cried it out with me, and that was wonderful. But mostly they just wanted to make sure that I knew that I was cared for, and they wanted to make sure I felt respected and protected.
Wow, I love that. My gut response to that is you're very lucky, and in a way, you are very
Yeah.
lucky. But I don't think we should have to be lucky to have that
No.
response when we come out, which is obviously a lot of the work that you were involved in. Can I just go back on one thing? You've only one brother, right? A twin?
No, I have an older brother, a twin brother, and a younger sister.
Oh, okay. I got because when you said my older brother, I'm like, hold on, is that the twin that was born first? Okay, sorry, I missed that.
No,
Okay,
I
so
would
you,
never. He was born second, and I've called him my younger brother at times.
of course, you have. Keep him in his place. I like that. I like that. When it comes to numbers that you check regularly, what is the most important one for you?
There's one, and everybody in my life knows that I check it. I check the sunrise and the sunset everywhere I'm at because I'm always on the road, right? Just in the last 2 weeks, I've been in 7 states, maybe more. And it's the one thing that helps bring me consistency is knowing I'm a big schedule person. I live and die by my calendar, but knowing when the sunrise and knowing when the sunset happens really helps me gauge the rest of the day.
I like that. I like that. Okay, a couple of quick fire questions for you. How much is in your wallet right now?
I had to check this, and I do. I have a crisp old 20 that has been wedged behind a credit card that I don't use for the better part of a couple of years.
Favorite time of day?
I love that late summer, early fall, long, slow, lazy, sunny afternoon.
I love it. How many coffees a day do you have, and what's your order?
I probably have two. So on a real bad day, maybe I'll have three. I didn't start drinking coffee until just a couple years ago, and so I have an espresso machine. So I like those little like super whipped up frothy little espressos, Dovios. But I also love me like a milkshake coffee. You give me coconut foam and pistachio this and hazelnut whatever and like a Lipitor afterward, and I'll drink that.
You're all in. What's your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure is an easy one. It's an evening joint with my best friends. I've got a great group of friends, and they've all got the best stories to tell. They all have very exciting, interesting days, and a lazy joint in the afternoon, maybe on that perfect sunny day that I was talking about.
What's the number that strikes the fear of God in you?
Pi. The answer is pi. And the reason is because pi reminds me that science is real and God is not. Nothing really strikes the fear of God in me. I don't believe in a God, but I believe in people and I believe in science.
I love that. Now you did. We can tweak this as well. But you said you wanted you emailed me that this morning. You said you wanted to talk about 825 because approximately there are 825. Oh. Yeah. Do you want so we can get that in as well?
It was not that question. It was the question about. Forgive me. I thought it was the fear of God. It was the question about the $3 million from the person that the governor put in. It was that question I wanted to skip.
Okay.
But I figured, what the hell, I could address it. That was the number the question I was. Forgive me, I forgot what question.
That's okay. But you know what? I still think that's a good one to get in. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
825. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah. I spend.
Do you know what? I'm just gonna just for the purpose of this. I was like, what's the number that strikes the fear of God in you, Brian?
You got it. I'm gonna let you do that one more time because I was talking over you.
What's the number that strikes the fear of God in you, Brian?
Fear of God, unfortunately, there's a lot of that lately, and it's 825, which I think by best accounts right now is the number of anti-LGBTQ bills that have been introduced in state legislatures across the United States. Every single state in the United States has anti-LGBTQ bills now have been introduced in them. The vast majority of which are specifically anti-trans, anti-non-binary. They are intended to strip people of their freedom of choice. They are intended to about their own bodies. They're intended to strip people of their freedom to make decisions about their own health care. They are intended to attack our youth and in many ways attack our sort of history and our heritage. People are attacking our future and our present right now, and that scares the hell out of me.
You know, I watched a documentary which I've seen before a couple of times. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called The Queen of Ireland, and it's on Amazon Prime. I really recommend that you watch it. But it's about a drag queen, the most famous drag queen in Ireland. Her name is Panty Bliss, and she of course, right? And Panty, through a kind of longer story, which I won't go into, became an accidental activist. And part of that was her involvement in the marriage equality referendum, which took place in May 2015 in Ireland, when Ireland became the first country in the world to put the question of marriage equality to a public vote. Terrifying. As an openly gay man living in that country at that moment, waiting on that result was terrifying because you were sitting there going, okay, if this is a no, basically the people of my country are telling me that I'm not an equal citizen, that they don't value who I am, that I am not an equal person like every other straight person in this country. And I remember thinking at the time, it's like, I won't be able to live here if that's the case. Thankfully, it wasn't the case. Overwhelming majority voted yes to marriage equality. So Ireland, as a very small, traditional Catholic, conservative country, traditionally speaking, has just done this massive quantum leap into equality, into, being one of the best places in the world to live and be gay. Our Prime Minister, or Taoiseach as we call him, is an openly gay man. And then I see all these regressive steps, you know, and it's not just in Russia. It's here. It's in, you know, the most free country in the world, supposedly. What's going on?
You know, some of this I still believe is an attempt by very powerful people and very powerful industries to sort of create a chaos instead of a status quo, maybe a chaos quo, to kind of keep us in a perpetual state of chaos, fighting over social justice issues that are core to a lot of people's beliefs. The other part of this, I think, is that we are doing a significantly better job in the United States of driving out this sort of heinous, vitriolic, anti-everybody sort of racism that in many ways defined our politics. There's not a single person of color in the United States that doesn't deal daily with racism because our politicians wouldn't deal directly with racism when they had the opportunity to do it. The same is true of sexism. We've had two waves of women's rights in the United States because of it. And now it's happening again with LGBTQ equality. You know, I'm one of the people that believes that marriage equality is very deeply on the chopping block right now in the United States. And
that horrifies me. That horrifies
horrifying,
me.
Right? You know, some of this is Citizens United. This Supreme Court, I believe, wrongly decided that industry could somehow play a significantly more active role in politics, like individuals, which they are not, and they should not be playing. And they've allowed billions of dollars to be pumped into our politics in a way to create chaos and to create division. The vast majority of people in America truly didn't care much about marriage equality. Those that did care about it supported it. And you know what marriage equality did to everybody else's marriages in the United States? Fucking nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing. Right?
It's like, you know, let live and let live, right? I mean, that's the basic tenet.
Well, you'd like to think. There is, you know, my politics are inclusive. My politics tell me not just that what's good for me is good for other people, that there are lots of things that are good for other people that might not be good for me, but certainly that have nothing to do with me, and that's okay. This selfishness, the myopicness of people who think that all things are about them, revolve around them, or deserve their attention, their decision making, or their approval, is one of the things that's broken right now in American politics.
And it's something that you're doing now on a day-to-day basis, right? When you're in your current role. Tell me just a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, I work for a company called Out Leadership. It's been around for over a dozen years, and Out Leadership works directly with many of the world's largest companies to help them find their voice in advancing LGBTQ equality, whether it's supporting their own employees, supporting being out within an industry, whether it's training the sort of their next leaders about equality and on equality, or having board members that are LGBTQ. We understand that business can be a mechanism for driving equality, especially in a country like ours, where far too many opponents of equality point to business and industry as some degree of a standard. Well, business and industry support equality, and my job is to get them to do it louder and faster.
Okay. Brian, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
It's maybe not a piece of advice I've ever received, but it's at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York. There used to be a sign that hung over the door of the football locker room. And players would hit it on the way out when they were going out. And it says, "I lay me down to bleed a while, and I will rise again to fight." And I think about that a lot. I never saw it in person. I read about it in a book. But I tend to think about it. Like everybody else, I get beaten down a lot. I get beaten down pretty hard. The news can be rough. Friendships can be rough. Maintaining family and relationships, all that's hard. And I think a lot. I lay me down to bleed a while, but I will rise again to fight.
Resilience. I love it. If you ask me, it's one of the most important traits that anyone can have in life to survive it. And very final question for you, sir, and I won't keep you much longer. What's the number one lesson that took you the longest to learn?
I've been an advocate or an activist my whole life. I have tried to take all of the lessons of my upbringing and all the neat places I've gotten to go and all the really fascinating people that I've gotten to interact with, and utilize those lessons and bring them kind of to the forefront when I'm interacting with other people. And it was a friend of mine who ran for office in Philadelphia years ago, a Latinx scientist who did not win, who very succinctly said to me, "Don't pretend to give a voice to the voiceless. Give them a microphone." And it has changed how I advocate in in almost every single way. And it's a sentiment that I hope to pass on to others.
I love it. Well, Brian Sims, thank you so much for your time. You're one of the good guys. Appreciate it. Keep up the good fight. And
Right back at you.
I will keep watching with wonder at everything that you do. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much.